The first thing Dax Mercer noticed when he opened his eyes was the ceiling. It was the wrong color. Concrete should have been gray, streaked with rust-water stains and the ghost outlines of old duct tape. This ceiling was pale ivory, smooth as poured cream, and it hummed very faintly, not the mechanical hum of ventilation, but something organic, almost like breathing. He lay still for 6 full seconds. Old habit. You learn that in the second year of siege warfare. Open your eyes, but do not move anything else until you know what kind of room you are in. He was on a cot. No, not a cot. Something shaped like a cot but made of a material that gave slightly under him like warm clay, reforming around his shoulder blades and the back of his skull. The blanket, if you could call it that, was a single membrane of faint gold, thin as a soap bubble but somehow warm. There were no seams in it. He moved his right hand first. It worked. He moved the left. He flexed his feet. Checked the inventory of his body the way you check ammunition. Still here, still here, still here. The last thing he remembered was running. Concrete corridors, the sulfur smell of emergency lighting, the sound of boots behind him, and then a light so white it was almost sound itself, and then nothing. He sat up. The room was hexagonal. 6 walls, each one slightly curved, as if the space had been grown rather than built. There was a door on the wall directly opposite. No handle, no keypad, just a seam in the material so fine he almost missed it. There was a window above the door, small and circular, and through it came light the color of early October afternoon, pale gold, low angle. But that was wrong too. The sky beyond the window was the wrong shade of blue. Too deep, too uniform, not one cloud. He was still wearing his clothes. Cargo pants, the green thermal he'd grabbed from the supply locker on level 3, 1 boot on and 1 boot off. He had no memory of losing the boot, which bothered him considerably. His sidearm was gone. He checked the cargo pocket where he kept his folding knife. Gone too. He checked the inside of his left boot, and then remembered the left boot was missing. He was standing in the center of the room, deciding whether the door was worth trying, when it opened on its own. She was tall. That was the first thing. Not tall in the way tall women were tall, proportional, leggy, but tall in the way a mantis is tall, as if the height had been designed for a slightly different gravitational constant. She had to duck fractionally to clear the doorframe, and she did it with the fluid ease of someone who had performed that precise motion 10,000 times. Her hair was the color of winter wheat, pale blonde with silver threaded through it, and it fell to her collarbones in a straight geometric curtain, every strand parallel, as if it had never occurred to her hair to be anything other than perfectly ordered. Her eyes were the issue. They were gold. Not amber, not hazel, not some biological trick of light. Gold, the hard, reflective kind, like looking at coins. They took him in the way a scanner takes in a barcode. Quick, sequential, efficient. She was wearing a uniform of some kind, fitted, gray-green, military in the way it suggested rank without displaying it. At her hip was a device that was definitely a weapon, but didn't look like any weapon he recognized. "You are awake," she said. Her English was perfect but slightly off rhythm, the way a piece of music sounds when played one tempo too slow. "We were concerned. The transit stress sometimes," she paused, looking for the word, "unmakes smaller species." "I'm not unmade," Dax said. "Evidently." She studied him a moment longer. "I am Vasa. I am the senior security officer of this installation. I have been assigned to explain your situation." "Great. Explain it." Vasa's head tilted at a precise angle, not human curiosity, something more mechanical, like a radar dish adjusting its aim. "You are in a subterranean habitat maintained by the Bifrexian Royal Detachment, currently in deep concealment beneath what your species designates as," she paused, checking something on a small device she produced from her left sleeve. "Montana. You are the only human male in this habitat. You are, as far as our intelligence suggests. the only human male who survived the Vulvan purge of your northeastern corridor networks. Dax sat back down on the cot. He had known this at some level. Had known it the way you know something in the dark before the light comes on. You've already mapped the shape of it by feel. After the cities fell, after the networks went silent one by one, after the last transmission from Chicago was just a carrier signal looping in the static, you did not maintain a lot of optimism about the arithmetic. But hearing it spoken was different. The only one, he said. In the sectors we've surveyed, there may be others. Our survey capability is currently limited. She said it without inflection, the way you report weather. How many of you are here? 14. And they're all female? Yes. The Bifrexian species is dimorphic, but our males operate primarily as administrative and diplomatic units. They were evacuated in the first wave. The security details, all female. The technical corps, all female. The Royal Guard, she gestured faintly toward herself, all female. And the princess? The gold eyes sharpened. You know of the princess. I know someone ran from the Vulvans. We picked up fragments of the transmission when it came in. Someone important. Someone they wanted badly enough to crack 3 of our eastern relay stations just to triangulate the signal. He looked at her steadily. That's a princess-level pursuit. Vasa was quiet for 2 full seconds. Then, her name is Farah. She is the last surviving member of the Bifrexian royal house. If she dies, the political legitimacy of the resistance dies with her. The Vulvan Empress understands this, which is why she sent her best hunter to find her. Who's the hunter? Her name is Reth. She was the Empress's personal henchwoman for 6 years. She is, another pause, a different quality to it this time, very good at her work. Is Reth on planet? We believe so, yes. Dax nodded slowly. He rubbed his jaw with the back of his hand. He needed a shave, needed water, needed to know how long he had been unconscious. He needed, in approximate order of urgency, about 40 pieces of information he did not have. What he said was, "What do you need from me?" Vasa looked at him for a moment that lasted slightly too long. I was told you would ask that first, she said, before anything else. Who told you that? The princess. She's never met me. No, but she has spent 14 months studying your species at very close range. She has developed opinions. Vasa's mouth did something that was not quite a smile. She says humans always ask what they can do before they ask what will be done to them. She considers it your most interesting trait. Tell her thanks, he stood. Now what do you need? The briefing room was 1 level down, and the walk there was the first time Dax got a proper look at the installation. It was larger than he'd expected, maybe 60 meters across at its widest point, with a central atrium rising 3 stories, open galleries ringing each level. The structure was entirely Bifrexian in construction. The same pale ivory material, the same soft organic hum running through everything, as if the building was a living thing in a light sleep. And the personnel. 12 of the 14 were visible as he crossed the atrium, and he registered them the way he registered everything, quickly, quietly, without making it obvious. They varied considerably. Some were Vasa's height or close to it, some were shorter, though even the shortest among them stood at around 5 feet 10. Hair colors ranged from Vasa's winter wheat blonde to pale silver to something close to white gold, all within that same cool, luminous range. Their uniforms differed in small ways that implied function, technical insignia here, medical markings there. They all watched him. Not with hostility, not most of them. Some with frank scientific curiosity, the way you look at a specimen that's more interesting than its file suggested. 2 of the younger ones exchanged a rapid-fire exchange in their own language, something that clicked and lilted, and one of them pressed her lips together as if suppressing something. He kept his face neutral and kept walking. The briefing room was circular, and smelled faintly of something he couldn't identify, copper and rain almost. At the center of the room was a holographic display currently showing a rotating globe of Earth with 3 red markers pulsing on it, 2 in the western United States and 1 somewhere over the Atlantic. Around the table were 6 chairs, 5 of them occupied. The woman at the head of the table was not wearing a uniform. She wore a garment the color of deep water, blue-green, layered, not quite a robe and not quite a coat, and her hair was longer than Vasa's, falling past her shoulders, the same pale gold but warmer, and it moved slightly when she turned her head as if there was a faint wind in the room that Dax could not feel. She was young, not in years necessarily, but in the way her face held itself. Open, attentive, alert without being guarded. Her eyes were the same gold as Vasa's, but the quality was different, warmer, more variable. They registered him with something that was definitely not scientific curiosity. "Dax Mercer," she said. "Lieutenant, United States Army, 3rd Battalion, Eastern Corridor Defense. You survived the fall of Portland, the fall of the relay network, and the transit pulse that should have killed you, which says something about you that our medical team found extremely interesting." A pause. "I'm Farah." "Your Highness," he said. She shook her head slightly. "Just Farah, we're a little past protocol." She gestured at the empty chair. "Sit down, we have a problem and we're running out of time to solve it." He sat. The problem, as Farah laid it out over the next 20 minutes, was elegant in its awfulness. The Vulvan Empress, a woman named Sara, which Dax thought was too gentle a name for something that had killed 3-star systems worth of inhabited worlds, had deployed Reth to Earth not simply to kill Farah, but to find the bunker. Killing Farah was achievable. Finding the bunker meant finding the Resistance's last secure archive, 14 years of consolidated intelligence on Vulvan fleet movements, supply lines, internal politics, and the specific structural weaknesses of the Empress's flagship. The archive was here. If Reth found the bunker, she would transmit the location, and the Vulvan fleet would reduce it to powder in approximately 4 minutes. Reth had been on Earth for 6 days. She had assets, 3 Vulvan scouts who had been on planet for longer, embedded in what remained of the human infrastructure in the region. "She knows roughly where we are," Farah said. "She doesn't know exactly. The installation's masking tech is very good, but very good has a limit. She's triangulating." "How long before she pins it?" Vasa answered from the corner where she stood. 40 hours, perhaps less." "And your technical team, they can't move the archive." "The archive requires the installation's power system to stay active. Moving it means powering down, which means the masking system goes offline, which means she finds you in minutes instead of hours." He turned the problem in his head the way you turn a rock to look at the underside. "So the archive can't move. The bunker can't power down. The masking system has to stay up, which means you need to deal with Reth and her 3 scouts before she finishes triangulating." "Yes. Why haven't your people gone after her already?" Vasa's expression shifted. The first time it had shifted, he noticed. "Because we don't know which of the 3 scouts is in which location, and if we move on one and miss the others, the ones we miss will transmit. We need to take all 4 simultaneously." Farah watched him. "We have 14 personnel. 12 are security or combat capable. 4 targets require split deployment. We know the general areas where the scouts are embedded. We've narrowed it to 3 zones, 2 scouts between 2 of them. We don't know which 2 are together." "And Reth herself?" "She'll be wherever she is when the scouts transmit the final coordinates, which could be anywhere." Dax leaned back in the chair. The holographic globe rotated slowly above the table, the 3 red markers pulsing like slow heartbeats. He looked at them for a long moment. "What's the range on your transport?" "Surface range." Vasa produced the small device from her sleeve again, checked something. "Approximately 8 kilometers radius from this position." "And your weapons, What do they do, broadly speaking? Disruption and elimination modes. Disruption incapacitates without permanent damage. Elimination. I get it, he studied the globe. The scouts are embedded in human infrastructure. Remaining human infrastructure is irregular, damaged. There will be people in those zones, civilian survivors. Yes, they've been using survivors as cover, the scouts. Farah's voice was flat for the first time. They move among them. It makes them harder to isolate. He nodded. He'd expected that. It was a clean tactic if you didn't care about the people you were using as camouflage, and Volvans clearly didn't. I know those zones, he said. The infrastructure. I know which buildings are structurally compromised, which corridors are dead ends, which blocks have survivors who will still listen if a uniform tells them to move. Your people don't know any of that. Silence in the room. You're suggesting, Farah began. I'm suggesting you put me out there with your teams, not to lead them. I don't know your weapons or your tactics or your command language, but to navigate, to route, to know which door leads where and which survivor knows which other survivor and how to get people out of a kill zone before your teams close it. More silence. Vasa was looking at him with an expression he couldn't entirely decode. You would be moving through open surface terrain, Vasa said carefully. If Reth scouts see a human male, they will know immediately that something's wrong. Yes, I know. He met her gold eyes. That's also a tool. He spent the next 4 hours with Vasa and a Bifrexian technical officer named Sale, who was smaller than the others, quicker in her movements, with the constant slightly distracted look of someone who's always running 3 parallel mental processes. Sale explained the weapons. Disruption mode required holding the emitter in contact with a target for approximately 4 seconds. Elimination mode required aiming and a 2-second charge. The handle was designed for longer fingers than Dax's, but not impossibly so. He ran dry drills for 90 minutes. Then Sale pulled up maps, not Bifrexian maps, actual salvaged pre-fall city planning documents, road grids, building schematics, and Dax spent another hour going through them with her, marking routes, marking pinch points, marking the blocks he'd personally traversed in the weeks before his capture, which meant before his transport, which meant before all of this. Vasa observed. She asked 3 questions, each one precise and practical, and each one told him something about how her mind worked. She did not waste words. She did not ask questions to demonstrate that she was asking questions. He found himself thinking, not for the first time, about the fact that the 14 people in this bunker had been fighting this war for longer than he'd known it existed. That they'd lost a civilization, a home system, a chain of inhabited worlds, the male half of their remaining population, and they were still in the fight, still organized, still running operations on a planet that wasn't theirs. He didn't say any of that, it wasn't the moment, but he noted it the way you note a landmark. Farah came to find him just before the deployment briefing. He was in the small side room they'd given him. A cot, a wash basin with water that came out warm and slightly mineral tasting, his boot mysteriously returned and cleaned. He'd been going through the routes in his head, the way you rehearse a route before dark, visualizing, marking the places where the plan would break and what you'd do when it did. She knocked, which surprised him. He hadn't expected her to knock. You don't have to do this, she said from the doorway. To be clear, you're a guest, not a conscript. I know. You also don't have to prove anything, to me or to Vasa or to anyone here. He looked at her. I'm not trying to prove anything. I know that too. She leaned against the doorframe, a human gesture he noticed, something she'd picked up. She stopped, and for a moment looked genuinely uncertain, which he suspected was not a state she wore often. I've spent 14 months among your species. I've watched humans do extraordinarily stupid things because they felt they needed to demonstrate something to themselves or others. It seemed worth eliminating that as a factor. You watch too many humans, he stood, or the wrong ones. Perhaps, the gold eyes studied him, you lost people in the siege. It wasn't a question, he answered it anyway, yes. So did we. She held his gaze for a moment. That's all. I wanted to say that before, she gestured vaguely toward the ceiling, toward the surface, toward what was waiting on the other side of the masking system. Just so it had been said. Noted. He picked up the weapon from the cot. Sale had calibrated it to his grip. Go be a princess, Farah, I'll be back. She almost smiled. That's a very human thing to say. Good, he said. That's generally what I am. The surface was the color of late November. Gray sky, frost on the ground, the faint smell of old smoke that had become so constant in the past year that Dax almost didn't register it anymore. He emerged through a concealed panel in the foundation of what used to be an agricultural equipment warehouse, 15 meters from the bunker's outer perimeter, and the cold hit him like a flat hand. His team was 4, himself, Vasa, and 2 others named Corin and Maze. Corin was broad-shouldered for a Bifrexian, with close-cropped silver hair and the quiet watchfulness of someone who'd done this kind of work for a long time. Maze was the youngest of the group, nervous energy contained in very precise movement, her pale gold hair pulled back tight. 2 other teams were deploying simultaneously to the other zones. Radio silence. Vasa carried a small device that would receive a single signal, 1 pulse. Scouts neutralized. 2 pulses. Abort. They were to execute at a predetermined time regardless of what the other teams reported, or not at all if the abort signal came. Zone 2 was 600 meters northeast, 3 blocks of what used to be light industrial buildings, now partially collapsed, serving as shelter for a community of approximately 40 civilian survivors, which was why the Vulvan scout had chosen it. They moved fast and stayed low. Dax led on the route. He knew which streets were clear of debris, which had caved-in storm drains that would eat an ankle, which intersections had lines of sight long enough to worry about. He moved in what felt to him like silence and probably sounded like a buffalo stampede to Bifrexian ears, but none of the 3 said anything about it. The scout, Farah's intelligence placed her as a tall woman with dark hair, traveling with a medical kit as cover, presenting as a human survivor, was embedded in a community shelter operating out of a loading dock on the northeast end of the zone. The problem was the loading dock had 2 entrances, and a clear view of the main approach from a broken window on the upper level. Moving on it directly meant being visible for approximately 40 meters of open street. Dax stopped them at the corner of the last cover. There's a maintenance tunnel, he said quietly. Runs under this block, connects to the building's boiler room. It's tight but passable. It comes out behind the shelter's main partition. The scout won't have a line of sight. Vasa looked at him. You've been in this building. I sheltered here for 6 days in October. Yes. She considered this for approximately 1 second. Show me. The tunnel entrance was a floor grate in the alley running alongside the building's east wall, partially buried under fallen brick. Dax moved the bricks, slow, quiet, no scraping, and pried the grate up. The tunnel was 60 centimeters across and smelled of mold and cold water. Corin went first because she was the one with the operational lead, then Maze, then Dax, then Vasa. It took 3 minutes to traverse and came out, as promised, behind a partition wall in the boiler room. The boiler room opened into the loading dock through a door that no longer had a handle but still had hinges. Dax checked through the inch of gap between door and frame. 40 people in the space, huddled in clusters, fires in metal drums, the smell of unwashed bodies and hot beans and something medical. He could see 2 children in the nearest cluster, asleep against a woman's shoulder. He checked his eyes across the space methodically. There, back corner, near the secondary exit. A tall, dark-haired woman with a medical kit open on the ground beside her, ostensibly treating a man's arm. but her attention wasn't on the arm. It was on a small device half concealed under the edge of the kit. She was working with it, triangulating. Dax eased back from the crack. "Back corner," he whispered. "Dark hair medical kit. She's got a device running, active." Vasa's expression didn't change, but her eyes did. "We need to move on her in under 60 seconds, or the reading she's compiling will be complete enough to transmit even if she's taken down. If we go through that door loud, the people in there scatter in every direction. We'll lose her in it." "We won't lose her. You'll have to fire in a crowd." He met her eyes. "Your disruption mode. What's the radius of unintended effect?" Vasa's jaw set. "Approximately 1.5 meters. There's a cluster within that radius, 2 children." A pause, 1 full second. "Then what do you suggest?" He was already reaching past her. "Open the door. Don't come in until I'm across the room." "That's..." "Open the door." She opened the door. He crossed the room at an angle, not running, because running in a crowded shelter causes panic, and he needed no panic. Moving fast but purposeful, like someone who knew where he was going, because people in shelters made room for purpose. The clusters shifted around him. He heard a few voices, a few questions. He kept moving. The dark-haired woman looked up from her device, and her eyes found him, and he saw in them exactly what Farah had described. Perfect professional recognition, nothing more. She started to reach. He was already close enough. He got a hand on the device first, knocked it sideways 3 meters, sliding across the concrete. Then she had his wrist, and she was stronger than him, definitely stronger, and she twisted in a way that should have broken something. And he went with the twist instead of fighting it, turning into it, taking the arm across his own body, and Vasa came through the people, not a word, not a sound, and had the emitter in contact with the back of the woman's neck before she could redirect. 4 seconds of disruption mode. The scout went down clean, no collateral. The device on the floor was cycling down already. Maze had crossed the room to it in the same moment and had her boot on it, stopping the transmission. The shelter had gone very quiet. 40 people were looking at them. Dax straightened. His wrist hurt. He looked at the nearest cluster, the woman with the 2 children awake now, both children gripping her coat, and he said in the clearest voice he had, "You need to move, all of you. This building is a target. I need you to take what you can carry and head southwest, the drainage building 3 blocks out. You know it." The woman nodded. She'd been surviving out here for a year. She knew it. "Go now. Tell everyone you see on the way." They went. Vasa stood beside him, watching the shelter empty. After a moment she said, "You went across without a weapon drawn." Weapon in a crowd that size with children, someone panics, someone runs into the shot. He flexed his wrist. It was sore but working. Besides, she grabbed for the device first, not me. She'd been told I was a possibility. She prioritized the transmission. That gave me 2 seconds. She would have killed you if we'd been a moment slower. I know. He picked up his weapon from where he'd kept it at his side, unused. Let's check if the other teams are clear. Vasa's device pulsed once. Then, after 3 seconds, pulsed again. 1 for each other team, both clear. 3 scouts down. Which left Reth? The signal had told Farah's communications team what they needed. Reth's position, finally pinned, because the scouts had been running their devices in passive mode when they went down, and the passive mode, as Sale had apparently anticipated, backfilled their last recorded triangulation data to the parent receiver, which was Reth's device, which was now a location. The message came through Vasa's device as they were moving back toward the bunker. A map reference, approximately 1 kilometer east, a structure that the pre-fall schematics identified as a water treatment facility. Dax read the coordinates. He knew the facility. He'd spent 3 days in it in October before moving on, when the Volvan sweeps had been at their worst. It was a good concealment choice. Thick walls, no external power signature, multiple levels below the main floor, good sight lines on the approach from 3 directions. The 4th direction was a blind spot. Dax knew about it because he'd found it by accident in October, when he'd been looking for a second exit and found instead a maintenance ladder that came up in the middle of the main floor from a sub-basement. Not on the schematics. A late addition, built after the last survey. He told Vasa. She looked at him for a long moment. You are suggesting we put you through the maintenance ladder while the security team draws her attention from the primary approach. I'm suggesting I can get within 10 meters of her before she knows I'm there. She will kill you. Probably not immediately. She'll want to know if there are others. Reth is professional. She'll take you apart looking for the location, Vasa said flatly. She'll try. He looked down at the weapon in his hand, and while she's trying, someone else closes the distance. Vasa said something in her own language, short, sharp, not quite a curse. I'll come in from the east access, Corin said from behind them. She'd been quiet for the last 15 minutes, through the secondary piping corridor. It connects to the main floor near the ladder exit, 40 seconds from the moment she sees him. Dax looked at Corin. You know the building. I read the schematics while you were reviewing the route. Corin's expression was entirely level. I have a very good memory. 40 seconds, Dax said. 38, Corin said. I was being conservative. He went in through the sub-basement. The ladder was iron, old iron, slightly corroded, each rung slightly different from the last because it had been installed piecemeal by someone working alone. He climbed it in the dark, feeling the rungs with his palms, 22 rungs, and at the top there was a hatch that was not locked, just heavy, and he pushed it up slowly, a centimeter at a time, until he could see the main floor. The facility was dim. High windows with most of the glass gone, gray afternoon light falling in flat columns. The treatment tanks were still in place, huge cylindrical vessels of sealed concrete, arranged in 2 rows, creating a corridor effect between them. Reth was at the far end of the room. She was not what he'd expected. He had built a picture from Farah's description and Vasa's flat summary. The Empress's personal hunter, 6 years of wet work across multiple star systems, and the picture he'd built was something austere and angular and cold. She was not cold, she was still. There is a difference. Cold is an absence, still is a presence, the specific stillness of a predator that is doing absolutely nothing because it is waiting, and its waiting is a form of action. She was standing with her back to one of the treatment tanks, a device in her hand, and she was studying the readout with total focus. Her hair was dark, darker than the rest of them, almost black at the roots fading to deep bronze at the ends. She was wearing something that shifted color with the light, adaptive camouflage, partially active. At her hip was a weapon that looked considerably more substantial than the ones Vasa's team carried. She had not heard him yet. The hatch was silent. His boots were the issue. He placed his first step with surgical care, then the second. On the third, a piece of corroded grating flexed under his foot, with a sound like a single note struck on a tin drum. Reth turned. She processed him in under a second. He could see it happening behind her eyes, the sequence of assessments, the immediate category assignment. Human male, live, armed, alone. She didn't reach for her weapon. Instead, she did something he hadn't predicted. She smiled. Interesting, she said. Her English was better than Vasa's. Faster, smoother, no rhythm displacement. She'd had more practice. You're Reth, he said. And you're the last male of your species in this sector, which makes you somewhat more valuable than your current posture suggests. She tilted her head, not the radar-ish motion Vasa made, but something looser, more dangerous. Which means you were sent here deliberately. Which means the installation is close enough to make this gamble worth taking. The smile didn't move. Smart, and also stupid. Those are not mutually exclusive. Neither are you, he said. No, Her eyes moved across him, checking corners, checking approaches. She was good at this. He could see her building the room's threat map in real time. You have, she was counting something. 15 seconds before whoever you came with circles to a position. I have to decide whether to shoot you now and move or to hold you and wait. 12 seconds now, he said. She drew fast. The weapon was already in her hand before he'd finished speaking, and it was pointed at him with the kind of casual precision that told him she'd aimed at things and fired at things a very large number of times and had not missed often. Don't, she said. I need you alive, but I don't need you mobile. He had not moved, I know. Then why are you smiling? He hadn't known he was. He stopped. He thought about Farah saying your most interesting trait. He thought about the shelter and the children in it moving southwest 3 blocks. He thought about Portland and everything that had come before Portland and the weight of all of it, which was considerable, and which he carried constantly, and which on good days did not slow him down. He said, because in about 4 seconds you're going to have to make a choice you haven't made yet, and you're going to get it wrong. Reth's expression changed. Not fear, something more interesting than fear, reassessment. Corin came through the east corridor. Not in 4 seconds, in 2. She'd been faster than conservative. The shot from her emitter caught Reth in the left shoulder, the weapon's shoulder, and in the half-second that Reth spun toward the new threat, Dax closed the distance and got his hand over her weapon hand and drove the barrel down and to the right, away from anything important. Reth was stronger than the scout had been, considerably stronger. She got an elbow into his ribs that made something creak, and she was already pivoting to bring the weapon back around when Vasa came in from the primary access. Dax hadn't known she was that close, and took Reth's weapon arm at the wrist, and Maze had her from behind, and even then it took all 3 of them and a considerable amount of floor before Reth went down. She didn't stop fighting until the disruption mode took effect. 4 seconds felt like a long time from the inside. When it was over, Dax sat on the floor with his back against one of the treatment tanks and took inventory. The ribs hurt. His wrist hurt. His left knee had met the floor at a bad angle at some point and was informing him about this in clear terms. He was, as far as he could tell, not actually broken anywhere. Vasa crouched beside him. She was breathing slightly harder than usual, which was the first evidence he'd had that she was capable of breathing hard. You're injured, she said. I'm cataloging. It looks like sitting. It's cataloging in a sitting position. He moved the wrist experimentally, sore, functional, Reth. Restrained, alive. She'll be out for approximately 3 hours. What happens to her after that? Vasa looked at him. She becomes a significant intelligence asset, which is considerably better than we expected to come out of this. He nodded. The flat afternoon light fell through the high windows, and the dust it carried moved in slow spirals. He sat in the quiet of it for a moment. The archive, he said. It's safe. Yes. And Farah. The installation is secure. He looked at his hands. The right one had a smear of something, not blood, some kind of lubricant from the maintenance ladder, and the knuckles of the left were scraped from the floor. Standard inventory. He'd had worse after bad mornings. You need to get checked by the medical team, Vasa said. In a minute. She didn't push it. She sat down on the floor beside him instead, which surprised him, and for a while they sat there in the half-light among the treatment tanks while Corin and Maze dealt with the operational cleanup, and the afternoon light shifted on the walls. Why did you tell her it would take 4 seconds? Vasa said finally. You knew Corin was closer. Yes. You gave her an incorrect count deliberately. She was running a threat clock. I wanted her clock wrong by 2 seconds. Vasa was quiet for a moment. She would have recalibrated from the moment you started speaking. 4 was specific enough to feel like real intel. Yes. Another pause. That is a very specific kind of thinking. It's a very human kind of thinking, he said. We do it when we don't have better options. He looked up at the windows and the moving dust and the gray October sky beyond them, the sky that was still the wrong shade of blue, still too uniform, too deep, missing something. What happens now, he said, long-term for your people? Vasa considered the question. The archive has to be extracted eventually. Transmitted to the resistance networks. The intelligence in it, if it reaches the right commanders, could shift the shape of the war. Not immediately, but over months. And Farah. Farah is, Vasa paused, and the pause had a different texture than her other pauses. Farah is the reason any of this means anything. The resistance isn't primarily a military project, it's a political one. The Bifrexian royal house is the legitimate government in exile. As long as Farah is alive, there is a center the resistance can organize around. An authority that isn't just, she seemed to be choosing words, practical arrangement. Legitimacy, Dax said. Yes. He'd understood that vaguely from the briefing. Hearing it said plainly was different. She knows that, what that means. What it costs. She has known it since she was a child. Vasa looked at him. The Volvans killed her mother in the first strike. She watched it on a transmission from 50 light years away. He didn't say anything to that. There wasn't anything useful to say. After a while he got up. His knee complained. He ignored it. Let's go back, he said. The bunker felt different when they returned. Warmer, somehow, not in temperature. The temperature was the same, that constant, slightly too warm ambient that he'd stopped noticing hours ago. But the atmosphere. The 14 women in the installation moved differently, spoke differently. The operational tension had broken, and what was under it was something he recognized. The specific loosening that happens when a crisis resolves and people who had been holding themselves tightly together are briefly allowed to stop. Sale found him in the corridor outside the medical bay and grabbed his arm with both hands, a slightly startling gesture from someone he'd only known a few hours, and said something in Bifrexian before catching herself and switching to English. The passive data from the scouts' devices, the triangulation data they were compiling. Vasa says you knew what it would do, that you anticipated the backfill. I anticipated that Sale would anticipate it, he said. I just happened to be standing next to Sale for most of the planning phase. Sale's expression did something complicated. That's a very, she stopped, collaborative way to put it. We had about 4 hours, he said. Collaboration was practical. He let the medical officer, a quiet woman named Heave, older than most of the others who handled him with brisk, efficient warmth, check his ribs and his wrist and his knee. The ribs were bruised. The wrist was strained. The knee was fine, Heave said, just insulted. She applied something from a small canister that felt cold and then immediately warm and told him to sit for 30 minutes, which he did not do. Farah was in the central atrium when he came through it. She was standing at the gallery railing on the second level, looking down, and when she heard his step she looked up instead. She came down the stairs. Not quickly, not as if she'd been waiting, not performing the not waiting. Just at a normal pace, and when she reached the atrium floor she stood at a distance that was neither close nor far and looked at him for a moment. Reth is secure, she said. Vasa gave me the brief. Good. 3 scouts neutralized, no civilian casualties, archive intact, and the installation's location is still unknown to the Volvan fleet. She listed these items in a way that made each one sound slightly more improbable than the last. I didn't expect all of that. Neither did I, he said. It was a plan, not a guarantee. No, the gold eyes held something that was not quite identifiable. You're injured. Insulted knee, strained wrist, bruised ribs. He've cataloged it. I'm aware. She told me before she told you what it all was. A brief pause. She was concerned about the ribs. She said bruised. She said probably bruised, and you didn't wait long enough to hear the probably. He opened his mouth and then closed it. Farah looked at him with an expression that he was beginning to be able to read. Not easily, not reliably, but beginning. "Sit down," she said. "There's food. Real food, or our version of it, which Sale has been adapting to human biology for 3 weeks and is very proud of despite the results being variable." He sat down. They brought food. It was variable, exactly as described. A grain-based thing that tasted like oatmeal would taste if it had been designed by someone who had read extensive documentation about oatmeal but had never eaten any. He ate it. He was hungry enough that it tasted fine. Several of the others drifted into the space, not crowding, not performing a gathering, just being in the same place in the way that people end up in the same place after a hard day when no one wants to be fully alone. Corin sat near the central display, studying something. Maze was on the floor near the far wall, eyes closed, not sleeping. Sale appeared with a device and started talking to no one in particular about the passive backfill data and what it told them about the remaining Scout Network's architecture, which was clearly how Sale processed relief. Vasa sat across from him with a cup of something. "You said human thinking is what you do when you don't have better options," she said. "Yes. We have been doing this for 14 years, the war." Her gold eyes were level and direct. "I have 31 personnel under my command across all installations, or I had 14 here now. The rest," she stopped. "The strategy of the Bifrexian military command has always prioritized preservation. Retreat and preserve. Consolidate and protect. Do not risk what cannot be replaced." "Smart strategy," he said. "It has not won us anything in 14 years. He looked at her. "The 2 seconds you bought by lying to Reth," she said. "The maintenance ladder that wasn't on the schematics. The shelter going in without a weapon drawn because the math on collateral was unacceptable." She turned the cup in her hands. "Our command doctrine does not include any of that. Our command doctrine says, if the math is uncertain, do not act. Wait for certainty. Certainty takes time." "Yes, and we have been waiting for it for 14 years. She looked at him steadily. "I don't know what the word for what you do is, in the command vocabulary we have." He thought about it. "Improvise," he said. "When the plan breaks, you improvise, you use what's in the room." She repeated the word. "Improvise. It's not always smart. Sometimes it gets you killed. But waiting for certainty." He turned the cup in his own hands, mirroring her without meaning to. "Waiting for certainty when the other side is triangulating means you're still waiting when they finish." Vasa nodded once, slow, the kind of nod that means something is being filed away. Farah, from 2 seats down the table, said without looking up from what she was reading, "We have been operating under the assumption that humanity's contribution to the resistance would be logistical. Your territory, your infrastructure, your navigational knowledge." "That seems reasonable," he said. "It is reasonable. It is also insufficient." She looked up. "Reth has been doing this work for 6 years. She has taken down 4 resistance installations, Bifrexian and otherwise. None of them walked a human male through a maintenance hatch in the dark to give her a false count of 2 seconds. None of them had a human male. No, Farah's expression was doing something he couldn't quite decode, which was becoming a theme. They didn't. The room was quiet. The installation hummed its organic hum. Through the small high window somewhere above, the wrong blue sky had gone to dark, night coming in fast at this latitude in November. The fires in the atrium's heating nodes came to life, and the light shifted warm. He thought about Montana in November, about the Eastern Corridor networks and everything that had gone silent in them. About 40 people moving southwest 3 blocks at his word, and what it meant that they'd moved. "The archive," he said, "when it goes out to the resistance networks, will they know where it came from? There will be attribution, yes, the Royal Detachment's encryption signature. Will they know it survived because a last human male crawled through a maintenance tunnel and lied to someone? Farah looked at him for a moment. Then, "No, not in those terms." "Maybe change that," he said. "When you write the transmission, just put it in. What got used, what worked." She tilted her head, the gesture that on her looked different from Vasa's, more considered and less mechanical. Why? He thought about how to answer that. He thought about the very specific kind of thinking Vasa had named, and about improvising, and about what it meant when a species had spent a year losing everything and still found 2 seconds when it needed them. "Because there are going to be other installations," he said, "other triangulations, and the people running them should know," he looked for the word, "should know it's available, the maintenance tunnel approach, in whatever form it takes." Farah looked at him for a long time. The gold eyes were warm in the firelight. "You're talking about a tactical doctrine." "I'm talking about a letter to the next guy who's out of options." She was quiet for a moment. "I'll write it," she said, "in those terms exactly." He nodded. He was tired. The kind of tired that isn't emergency mode tired. The kind that only arrives when the emergency is over and your body finally files all the receipts from the last 12 hours. Maze was asleep against the far wall. Sale had moved to the technical station and was running analyses with quiet intensity. Corin was still at the display, half watching the globe with its red markers now dark. No signals, no transmission, clean. Vasa refilled his cup without asking. The food on the table was still variable, and he ate more of it. He thought, the only human male in this sector, in this installation, in this corner of a war that had been going on longer than he'd known it existed, sitting at a table with a princess and a security officer in a bunker under Montana that hummed like a living thing. He thought, "I've been in worse rooms." Farah was reading something again. She moved between documents with the speed of someone who processed text the way other people processed air, necessary and constant. But she was also, very slightly, aware of him. He could see it in the way she held the peripheral, the small adjustment in posture when he moved. "You belong to all of us now," she said, not looking up. He nearly choked on the grain-based oatmeal. "I'm sorry." She looked up then. It's a Bifrexian expression for, she considered, integration into a unit. When an outsider proves themselves to a group, it's not possessive in the way your language makes it sound. It means the debt runs both ways. We owe you, you owe us. The accounting is collective. He thought about that. "In human terms," he said, "we usually just say you're one of us." "Yes," she tilted her head, that considered version. "I suppose that's the same thing." "More or less," he said. The installation hummed. The night settled over Montana, over the wrong blue sky that was darker now and probably scattered with stars he didn't know. And the archive in its protected memory pulsed with 14 years of accumulated truth. And the fires in the heating nodes were warm. And somewhere 2 levels up Reth was starting to stir, which meant there was more work ahead, more negotiation and more intelligence, and more of the improvised math of staying alive one step ahead of people who were very good at finding you. He was, he thought, in the right room. He picked up the cup Vasa had refilled and drank from it, and the grain-based something was variable in exactly the way Sale had promised. And Farah was still watching him from the corner of her vision with her document held at an angle that did not entirely account for her focus. And Corin's map on the display was clean, and Maze was asleep. And Sale was running beautiful impractical numbers about passive data backfill, and all of them were alive, and the archive was safe. And the count had been wrong by 2 seconds, and that had been enough. He thought about all the things that humans did when they didn't have better options. He thought, it turns out that's a lot of things. He stayed at the table until Vasa told him the medical bay had a proper cot, which he found considerably more convincing than the original offer of 30 minutes of sitting. And he went, and he slept. And in the morning the first thing he noticed when he opened his eyes was the ceiling, pale ivory, smooth as poured cream, humming faintly. And it was still the wrong color, and it was still the right room.